Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted to be joined by Melanie Attwater, who is a luxury agent for EXP in the Surrey area. Melanie, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Glad the weather's calmed down a little bit. But yeah, very good, thank you.
It's a lot nicer. Estate agent, but not to begin with. I think you were in marine insurance, if that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, I started off in
Um,
marine insurance in the city, yes.
bit of a change.
Uh-huh.
What made you change?
Well, I guess it was over quite a number of years. I'm 57 now. So I graduated from Leeds University, Spanish and business, got a graduate job in London and loved it. It was fascinating. And then I ended up kind of moving into more of a sales role. I was approached to work for a company, a conference and exhibition company, which was Global Trade. And so I was working with them in the kind of corporate sales. So I'd go to Hong Kong, Singapore to meet with HSBC and Standard Chartered. So I was negotiating at quite a high level. And in the meantime, I was also renovating properties because I had a passion for architecture and interior design. And I guess it just organically evolved, and I moved to Portugal, and that's where I started, kind of in real estate. I was originally working for a currency company, going around lots of different estate agents, and yeah, it just became obvious that was the thing for me to do. So I started off looking at working in real estate myself in Portugal, but then I moved back to the UK to have my son, who's now 13. And
Congratulations.
yeah, just went to work for a high street branch. And and yeah, that's where it started.
Okay, so you talked about negotiation.
Hmm.
So obviously that's a massive skill you need to have as an estate agent. And sadly, there are far too many estate agents that are lousy at negotiating their own fees, and they're lousy at negotiating the best amount, the highest amount for their seller as well.
Hmm.
What tips can you give to agents watching this?
Hmm.
What that you picked up to start off with?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just having the skill set. I always say the critical skills of an expert agent are marketing, negotiation, communication, and expertise. And I could talk about all those things for quite a long time. And 80% of my business are people that have been on the market with other agents and failed to sell. Usually as a combination of a lack of all those skills, but specifically marketing, where you look at the images and it's just shocking. And in the kind of luxury property arena, you see properties on the market for 2 million plus and no video, especially when they've got grounds and drone footage comes into play and people understand the setting. Then I think that's really critical in the luxury market. So in terms of skill set, I think you need those marketing skills, and the customer service skills. Listen to your clients and understand your client. And I think because I've traveled quite a lot up to now and lived abroad, that gives me a good rapport with my client base, because often they've traveled and worked in the city and what have you. So I guess the tips are understand your client, understand your client base and listen to them. Because if you don't listen to them, you don't know how to solve their problems. And then maybe going back to negotiation, there's so much you can online learning now. There's amazing books out there. So it's a continual learning process. And in fact, I work alongside Roger Black and Steve Backley, the Olympians, um, because they do a lot of coaching worldwide. And there's a lot of similarities between sports and self-employed estate agency, in that you have to have resilience, you have to be driven, continual training. When a house falls through, get back on the horse. How do we solve this, rather than sitting there complaining? Just in the sports world, if you have an injury, you've got to get back there and keep on going. So there's a lot of similarities. So I think it would be just continuous learning and be amongst the best, you know, surround yourself with really good people who you can learn off, and have a good community around you.
I couldn't agree more. And you've got two great guys that you partnered up with.
Hmm.
Who've won a few medals between them over the years, a few golds, a
Indeed.
few silvers.
And they're really nice guys as well.
They are. I have had the pleasure of meeting them both, and I think they've both been on the podcast, and they are exceptional. So let's come back. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Portugal, and then I want to break
Mhm.
down everything that you said. So Portugal, the fees are a lot higher than they are in the UK.
5%.
5%. So how can agents get a higher fee in this country? I'm not saying get 5%, but at the
Mhm.
moment it's definitely a race to the bottom, and there are far too many agents that are charging considerably less than what they are worth. So,
Yeah, I think it ties into what I was saying before about skill sets. If you have got a great skill base and you can have stories, stories are great case studies. If you can demonstrate to a client, and especially like for me, I was saying, 80% of my business are people on the market with another agent because of poor marketing, negotiation, communication, and expertise. If you feel confident in your skill set and you've got all of those stories and case studies how you've delivered for clients time and time again when other agents haven't, that confidence, it's a bit like, oh, I think we've lost the sense of expertise in our industry. You go to an architect, expecting them to really know their stuff and to be qualified and to be really helpful and guide you and support you and all of those things. We've lost that, I think, to a large degree in high street agency. So for me, to get the fee, if you know your stuff and you really genuinely believe you can add value because you've done it time and time again, that substantiates the reasoning why you should get a better fee. But then also in terms of negotiation, um, I said in a recent podcast about, if an agent can't even negotiate a good fee, how are they going to negotiate a good price on your house, like you said before? So I always say my fee is more than offset by the price that I get for a client. So one is the price I get, but also it's getting it from the best buyer who doesn't mess around, who's committed. Because the last thing any seller wants is 2 weeks before exchange, the buyer to pull out and all of the seller's plans and everything, all of that money they spent on solicitors, the emotional, the mental, everything has been just awful. It's a shock to the system. So my job is to look after my clients with everything I've got and make sure we've got committed buyers, which again pulls in the communication, because the more the communication is good with your seller, but also your buyer. If you've got great comms with your buyer, then you should see any red flags and everything else early in the process. So yeah, sorry, there's a lot there, but does that answer your question?
it does. But let's talk about committed buyers. How do you get commitment from your buyers then? What are you using?
Yeah, I mean, it's relationship. I mean, I say, so for example, when I do a viewing, before the viewing, I dig deep, is this, what are you looking for? Are there any deal breakers? Oh, we need a garage. Well, this one hasn't got a garage, so, whereas rather than, oh, yes, I can book you in at 2 o'clock, dig deep, a 30-minute conversation if they've got it to try and find out. I always say, have you loved a property and lost it? Why did you love it? You know? So what we want to do is make sure that we get the quality buyers rather than the quantity of buyers going around to make sure it's a good match for their sake as well. So it's a very much a matchmaking service. That's what we should see it as. So getting the match right. If you get the match right, then that commitment should be there. And then I do all the viewings. I know the property, I know the seller, I can see the whites of the buyer's eyes, and also just engaging with them. When you're going round and building a relationship with your buyer. And then when they do offer, then I'm on a WhatsApp group with them, and I'm like, do you need an architect? Obviously book your survey, you look for all those critical landmarks in the process. But just that engagement, that builds trust with the buyer, and I think that's really, really important.
Okay, I want to come back to something else that you said, because I think we've gone to the same school of learning. So for me, it's all about adding value. Um, and you've touched on a couple of things already about adding value. What tips can you give other agents about adding value? And before you do that, I'm going to be purely selfish here, and I'm going to give you a tip that really impressed me when my
Mhm.
girlfriend was selling her property. So two agents came in. One, she had a really nice long garden, didn't even bother looking. The second agents looked at the garden, came in, and they said, the first thing we're going to do, with your permission, is we're going to call a local architect because we think there's scope for extending on the side and extending at the rear. And I'm sure you're going to have buyers that potentially going to. So straight away, he had won me over by saying that. So I think that's a great example of adding value when you're on the appraisal, valuation, whatever you want to call it. What other
100%.
examples have you got, Melanie?
So, for example, I do that with buyers, like on a viewing. I also, one thing I do at the moment is, especially since a lot of my clients are downsizers, so that some properties need modernisation, I'm literally do this pretty much every day at the moment. And so I'm with the buyers and I say, well, look, this is the photograph on Rightmove, what it looks like now. I'm going to run it through ChatGPT and make it contemporary. And literally their face lights up at a viewing, like, even really, really smart people go, oh my goodness, now we've got that vision, we can see something. But also things like I had a lovely property in Caterham, beautiful Victorian property overlooking the park. And you could see that outside it needed some work doing. So moisture had got into near the windows, needed replacing, and the plasterwork probably needed to come off. So we got a surveyor before we even put it on the market, so that we had a heads up. Well, yes, we've done an analysis of what the costs will be. So we factored that into the price of the property. And just that chance, and if you want to see the site of that to the buyer, then you can. And that stops any objections. Oh, well, we're going to put in a cheeky offer because we know this work needs doing. Well, no, because that was factored into the price and we've got the survey, should you wish. And it's just showing, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, show expertise, know about property, highlight the great points that people are going to look for. What's the likelihood they'll get planning permission? Stand down the road. Who else has done a loft conversion? Who else has done an extension? Because that's a precedent for the road. Show your expertise. It always comes back to that.
Okay. I'm curious to know how you manage to get 80% of your business through other agents. Because
People come to me, yeah, without sounding arrogant at
no, no,
all.
no. What I mean
Yeah,
is crazy that 80%, that is such a high number. Their
because it's
fir-
shocking out there.
their first agent is not
Or
doing
second,
what they
even.
should be. Yeah, so it's scary.
I
So
think what might be useful, I don't know if you can add it to this recording, but I can send you two examples, great visual examples of this was on the market for a year with another agent, didn't sell. And the difference, one property looks like a haunted house. And then I do a video, I do twilight shots, and you would never know it was the same house. And that's why, and I say to people, it's not you. You trusted your agent, because people go, oh, we feel really stupid. No, you trusted somebody who said, we're an estate agent. We've got it over our door. We know what we're doing. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of great agents out there, but sadly, the fact that that statistic is there, 80% of my business, I don't go out looking for them. They ring me, and it's just sad. But hopefully, we're raising the bar in estate agency. So it's all looking good.
100%. And that's what this is all about. And this is what this podcast is all about, is about sharing. So trust is a big word in the estate agency, especially there's such a lack of trust of estate agents and
Mhm,
rightly so. For newer agents coming on, how
mhm.
can they build trust? And you've mentioned a lot about building relationships as well. How can they go about and build trust and build relationships, please?
I think for me, I certainly built my business. It was just sort of COVID times, a lot on social media. And I think by me just saying, oh, well, I'm here at the local community Saturday market doing this, or we're just prepping for the photographs, I'm just brushing up outside the house. It's demonstrating what you do rather than telling people what you do. When you show people that you're passionate, you care, you work hard, you're doing everything you can in the smallest details, like turning the hem round on a lampshade for photographs. When people see you in action doing it rather than going, oh, yeah, well, marketing's great and we do this and we do. I think that's where it builds the trust. Just be you. And, we band the word authentic around all the time, but it is just, it's really lovely. I got a message on Messenger once, and a lady said, uh, we've been watching you for 2 years. We're not ready to sell, but when we are, we're coming to you. So be mindful that you might not get, for new agents, you might not seemingly get the interest, but people are watching you. you know. And that's why Marks and Spencer's advertise on television every day. You're front of mind, they're there, and that's what marketing is, that presence. But I think, yeah, just be genuine and be who you are and show your expertise, show that you care, and that builds trust.
Okay. How do you get that consistency though?
It's hard. When you're growing a business, you have to prioritize. Time management is a big thing. And I've lost my consistency and I need to get back into it, because you do, just when you get busy, some of those things have to those balls kind of fall. But have a good team around you, and again, learn from other people. And there's, in this industry, like especially like within EXP, there's such a great support network, and there's people like yourself coaching, and been there, done it, and people will be honest with you. So again, surround yourself with the right people.
Okay, so I understand you've already co-authored a book on motivation
Oh yes.
as well.
Uh-huh.
So what did you learn from co-authoring that book?
Yeah, it was. So I just did one chapter out of many, and it was Success Secrets of Motivation, what motivates me. And purely and simply, I like helping people. I genuinely do. I do go the extra mile for my clients because I care. I genuinely do. So, yeah, it was just, the chapter was about, my experience. And I think you give the standards that you expect off other people. I expect quite good standards when I go to a restaurant or whatever. And I just think, well, if I was selling a house and putting my trust in somebody to sell one of my, if not the most, one of my most expensive assets, then again, there's a relationship there. I want to make sure that I deliver, and all of my business is based on, reputation and recommendation. So,
Right,
I think
fantastic.
that it comes definitely.
So I heard Regina speak on the podcast, and I thought she summed it up brilliantly. There's no competition in the extra mile because nobody goes the extra mile, and I thought that was brilliant. So what can you do in that extra mile? How can you stand out? How can you be remarkable? How can you get people remarking about you all the time because you're adding value and you're making a difference? And it was interesting what you said previously about chat, that
Mhm,
turning around the property from where it is now. So look how,
mhm.
imagine yourself living in here, um,
Yes.
and doing that. And it's just these little things, these marginal increments, that make a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about listening. Okay. Have you got any tips about listening?
I think it's why you listen. So one of my pet hates in the industry is when people say, I'm going to valuation. And for me, evaluation is a tiny part. You're going to meet some people to find out what's going on and how you can help them. So the first thing you want to do is listen. So it's not about you, what a great salesperson you are. So when I go to see somebody, I say, okay, what's happening? How can I help you? And usually, people are, oh, well, I've got a stage around, they're going to value my house. And I go, okay, so let's just park the sale for a moment. Where where do you want to go to? What you got? Have you seen? Have you looking at a different location? How can I help you find? Because usually, unless you can solve that problem, and that's probably what's keeping them awake at night. Not everybody thinks their house is going to sell like that.
Of course.
Their problem is where they're going to move to. So if you can sort that problem out, and again, it goes back to adding value, then let's look at selling your house then, because then you understand time scales, the motivation, all of those things. And another thing that I do is on a listing, I do what the sellers say. And so many buyers say, oh, we loved what the sellers say, because you're selling what it means to live in that home. And so when you have that meeting with your clients, you can say, right, we like to do this, and say, what is it that made you buy the house? Because the reason why you bought the house would probably be the reason why somebody else is going to buy the house. So I think in terms of listening, and if you think you understand why you're listening and why you need that information, then you're going to do
Uh,
it.
I think that's great. And actually, what's the invisible value of your home? So some of the things is, what have you actually done that no one can actually see? So it may
Yes.
well be I've got underfloor heating. It may well be that we've got these solar panels, and it's just asking those questions as well.
Like a
I think,
WhatsApp group for the community,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, all of those little things.
yeah. Great. And again, it's just these little things that stand you out and make a massive difference. And one of my favorite things is actually when you've exchanged is to do a video with the seller to say, look, congratulations, Melanie. Fantastic news. What I like to do is do a little video with you to ask you all the questions that Stephen would, I'm sure, be asking me when he completes. Like, who's your doctor? Who's your dentist? And what day do the bins come, where's your loft ladder,
Mhm,
etc.,
mhm.
etc. And then I would send it to the buyer and say, look, I've just shot a video with Melanie. I know you're completing Friday. Here's some information that I hope will find useful. And actually, these lasting impressions, hopefully, the last impression will be a lasting impression because you're doing something different than most other agents aren't even doing.
And
Um,
well, even post completion, I'm available. You know, post might arrive from the people. I've delivered things. In fact, I've got some post in my car that I need to deliver. So I'm available at post completion as well. And I think that, the money's in my bank account, but I'm still working for you. I think that shows genuine care.
and I think it's scary because I think in this country we were way too transactional. And once people sell a property, that's it, they go into witness protection. So, do you have some form of stay in touch policy after for your buyers that they consistently hear from you, or do you have some form of policy?
I don't have a policy, but I suppose one thing that I do is on anniversary. I will say it's a year since you moved in. How are things going? And I think that's really lovely. So I do that. But then, like I said, I do build relationships with a lot of my clients, buyers and sellers in particular. So those conversations, I still go around for a glass of wine with clients that have, so, but I think it's because you do build that relationship. Um, so that's a lovely part of my job. It's the people.
Fantastic. I want to come back to you something that you said. So surround yourself by great people. And you talked about Roger and you talked about
Mhm,
Steve and you talked about maybe the other people that wrote the other chapters of a book that you co-authored. What have you
mhm,
learned from these people? I know you touched on resilience earlier,
mhm,
and solving problems, and they always want to continuously learn.
mhm.
Um, what else?
Well, I mean, the thing that is it, really. The people, all of those people, the reason why they're so successful and great is because they have humility. They don't think, oh, I know it all. I've been in this business 30 years and, you probably got bad habits and all that kind of thing. Just continually have that mindset to want to be better. You know, um, there's always ways we can improve, and obviously with AI now, there's so many ways that is affecting our business, and there's more tools to use. And like virtual, I've just been doing some stuff. Taking a home and getting a virtual what it could look like. So it's just always learning new stuff, and I think that's the critical thing, really, is learning.
So what books have you read? You talked about books earlier that have influenced you and made a difference.
Well, I've just bought a book called Influence, but I'm always listening to podcasts, and there's loads of coaches in our industry like yourself and others. So, and also and conferences. So I go to our conference in the UK. We had our conference 2 weeks ago now, where we had Davina McCall and we had other speakers. So the events are really good. And then I went to a conference in Miami where we had like globally renowned speakers there. Um, and then we've got a conference coming up in Europe, and I don't even know who's speaking there. But so it's listening to people who are, you know, just great at giving you golden nuggets to go, okay, how that's really helpful because you can read, and if you don't do anything with it, then it's no good. But I think I love listening to people at conferences. I think that's really good because there's that human aspect. But yeah, just trying yeah, just I think because my Audible is full of books, so
Good.
I do listen to a lot.
I'm gonna put you on the spot then.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Miami, what was your one biggest takeaway that you've
Mm.
actually actioned and implemented?
I think, well, it's funny. One of the speakers there, Will Guadara, he wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. And he owns a restaurant in New York. And funnily enough, the Miami conference was in October. And I actually read this. I ordered this book back in the February before I even knew he was going to be speaking at this conference. And I remember listening to a lot on the plane actually. So I bought the book because I like to highlight it. I'm old school, but I also got Audible so I could listen to it on an aeroplane. And it's about service. And it's about, so he had this restaurant and he wanted to be Michelin star. And so when somebody phoned up and said, oh, I'm going to propose to my girlfriend, so they had kind of a heads up, they'd pour a glass of champagne or whatever. And they thought, well, you know what, everybody does that. Let's do something different. And they ended up getting some Tiffany glasses and pouring champagne into the Tiffany glasses. And then on with the bill, the bad news, they'd give a gift box with the same flutes that they'd drunk and celebrated their engagement. And it's again that extra mile, that service, which I always is innate in me because I just love giving good service. But it was just get better at that, get better at delivering exceptional service. I guess that was my best learning from that.
Thank you. So what do you think agents need to do to get better then here? I know I've asked you the trust question.
I think
Um,
it comes down to care. There's if you care about wanting to deliver the best service you can, then you've got to graft. How do I improve what I know about property, about people, about negotiation? Again, going to those critical skills, marketing, negotiation, communication, expertise. How do I get better? And it's all out there, whether it be books, podcasts, coaches, other agents. It's all out there now. It's so easy to get hold of that stuff. So if you care about, then that will drive you to become better and continue doing that.
so I think there's loads of people that goes to loads of great conferences,
Hmm.
but they don't take action.
Uh-huh.
So tips on actually taking action and getting started.
Well, maybe have a buddy and say, right, we're going to agree to do this. Let's catch up in a month's time. Did you read that book? What were your learnings from that? Let's go to this event. Da, 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 da. Just have accountability, I guess, but also have accountability with yourself. Put a reminder in your phone, check yourself kind of thing in terms of put it in your diary. And again, a lot of it comes down to time management. Make sure you put things in your diary to make time for those things so you've done it and it'll pay off.
Okay. So negotiation, big thing. Okay.
Hmm.
Whether it's on your fee, whether it's getting the best price for your seller.
Hmm.
Um, Top tips.
Top tips. Well, again, it's a skill, so skill yourself up. There's loads of books again out there and stuff, and learn from other agents. Um, there's loads of agents who can give people tips on negotiation, but for me, the things that I use in fee objection is stories. Build stories. If you're not going to remember them, write them down. So, for example, you're there, like for example, a survey comes through. How did you negotiate with the buyer? You know, that there was something reasonable. There was a bit of play, but not too much, where they're taking the mick. So when you have stories, keep those stories and have them on your website. You can say, well, these are proven. I say I'm a good negotiator, but I can tell you 10 case studies of how I proved that negotiation. And not only in like when the survey comes in about timescales, when people are just deciding on completion dates, the seller wants to complete on this date but the buyer wants to complete on that day. How do you negotiate between the two? And another thing that I always say in terms of fee objection is, and again I've got the story to back it up, is, well, I saved my seller 40,000 on his onward purchase by negotiating on his behalf. I mean, that offsets my fee and the rest. So show your value. If you show your value, then you should have no problem. You know, people respect you.
Well, there's loads of gold there. Right. So just want to unpack it a little bit more because this is something that I love. Um, and I think it's so important and it's scary how much I see get left on the table because agents, you know what, oh, it doesn't matter if I get them an extra 50,000 because, you know, what's that, 100 quid for me? Makes no difference. But it's life changing for the seller, life changing. So one of the
100%.
things, you know, that I love that you talked about is you look at your last 10 offers and, you know, you can demonstrate how much you negotiated on each one. And one of the things that I find is if I ask people, can they tell me what their first offer was to last offer was on every property? I don't think a lot of agents actually know that. And that's an easy way to demonstrate your negotiating skills. So
Mm.
hypothetically, this property was on 700,000. The first offer came in at 650. The last offer was 710. We've negotiated an extra £60,000. Over our last 10 sales on average, you know, it may have been £122,000. That's quite a powerful number, but so many agents don't demonstrate that, which I find scary. Something else that I love, you talked about objections. So it
Mhm.
sounds like to me you have learned or written down every single fee objection or objection you're going to get and that you practice them. So for me, really important because professionals practice before they play. So I'll be writing down every objection I get on whatever it is. And I loved your point about baddying because you may be a solo agent, so you can't practice by yourself, but you can practice with like-minded people as well and go on that. But something that really piqued my curiosity, and I know works 100%, is you talked about onward purchase.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a lot of people that most probably watching or listening this are thinking, what are you talking about? So could you go into a little bit more detail about onward purchase for me, please?
Yeah, and it starts from the beginning. Like I said, you know, when I go to see a client, sit down, where are they going to? And I say, well, look, you know, let's look at that. And because, you know, you're there to give your expertise, to show you care. You know, you're holding their hand through this process. You're going to be there alongside them. You're there to support them. And so I said, there's various ways that I can help you. You know, you might be looking on Rightmove, which I'm sure you are. And I always say, you know, I always recommend that people do because a lot of people go, oh, I don't want to look on Rightmove until we're under offer. Yeah, but what if we find you a buyer who who is ready to go? They're a cash buyer and they want to move in because the school starts in September. But also, the more you go and have a look, the more you understand what works for you. So get that all in. Um, so I say, right, you can be looking on Rightmove, but also if there's a road you particularly love, I will hand deliver a letter on lovely GSM paper, hand signed by me in an envelope that's hand signed, not a leaflet going, we've got buyers looking in your area, and a letter saying, my clients, you know, Jane and Andy, they've asked me to approach people down your road because they love that road. They've loved it for years and they're all going on the market with me. Um, and I say, da, 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 this is what they're looking for. And I say, if you've been having conversations about selling, but are unsure where you're going to move to, let me do for you what I'm doing for them. Now they can see that I'm doing that because they've just got the letter. It's not just talk. Um, and it's amazing. And in fact, I saw an interview, and it's a quite an interesting guy, and his name eludes me now. But um, a lot of British people, if you put a note through their door saying, "Have you been having conversations about moving?" A lot of them do. We love moving house in this country. Maybe not at the moment, but you know, so a lot of people, especially downsizers, they may have been on their, they've been having discussions for 2 years, but then we're waiting for the right moment. And so I say, right, to my sellers, I can hand deliver a letter to the roads you like. And if it's out of area, I'm part of a global network, never mind nationwide, and I can contact agents in Newcastle or wherever it might be, Edinburgh. But also, I was selling a hotel for a family in France. They had a beautiful boutique hotel on the French Riviera, and they wanted to move to LA. So I reached out to agents in LA to help them find a new development project. So, I think in terms of onward purchase, you're adding value. Again, it goes back to that's probably the thing that's keeping people awake at night is where they're moving to, not selling the house.
And you also get a fee for doing that as well.
So for my clients, I see that's part of my service. I give a very personal concierge service. So that's part of my fee. But if somebody is not selling something or they're selling with another agent, and I do a search and secure service where I will charge a fee.
Okay, lovely. Also notice something that you do is you give a listing audit for properties that are on the market, which is
Mm-hmm.
something I've never come across, which I
Well,
think
it just
which I
yeah.
think is great. Are you comfortable to share a little bit about that?
Well, this is brand new, but it's based on my experience. So, for example, the examples I was mentioning before, you know, um, people say, "Oh, we've been recommended to you," blah blah blah, and I say, "Send me a listing," and so they send me their listing, and I'm like, oh, lead image, is is just terrible or awful, there should be a twilight shot, like within a millisecond, bullet points in capital letters, no video, description that is just so boring, you know? And so because I am seeing this day in, day out, because this experience, then I'm offering an audit saying, send me your listing. Not only can I advise you on this is what I would think would attract attention, and even just pricing, you know, properties priced at 1,050,000. Anybody who's looking up to 1 million will not see that house on Rightmove. It should be offers in excess of 1 million, so you're catching that massive audience. And this is where I go into rant mode, Stephen, because I do rant a lot because it drives me insane. So I can, and hopefully, they can speak to their agent and go, well, look, we've had a conversation with this lady. She seems to know what she's talking about. Can you do these things? Sadly, Stephen, invariably, they just can't deliver. And I say, well, look, I've got a nationwide network of really good agents that I trust. Okay. And I'm only going to recommend you on the basis that I believe they can deliver for you. And I'm going to keep a beady eye on it as well, because I'm a bit of a control freak, but also if it's global as well. And so I can find you an agent, because like I said, 80% of my business is people who've been failed. There's a big market for this, sadly. And it should go to agents who are going to deliver so people feel it's not them. Sadly, they've been poorly serviced. So,
Thank you. I think that's great, and I think that's very different, and it makes you stand out and makes you memorable as well. I want to come back, and I'm going to last question now because I'm conscious of time. So, again, you talk about 80% of your business comes from referrals. If you're starting off as a new agent, how do you get your first, your second, your third instruction?
ask, tell family and friends to share what you're doing. Get out there on social media. Just be you. People buy people. They want to know who you are and what you've got to say and add value. And we've got all these tools now like ChatGPT. Stick in ChatGPT. I'm a new agent. What should I do a social media post about to showcase that I care about people and that I've got the skill set to add value? There's loads of databases out there, properties that have been on the market for over 6 months and not sold. Have a look at those, see, is it low hanging fruit, of which there is a lot, where it's been poor marketing, price is just reduced. Right, perfect time to go and approach somebody. Go and send them and I think hand delivered letter is so much because it shows that you're local and that you care enough to put a letter through their door yourself. So I think there's loads of things you can do as a new agent and reach out to people, reach out to other agents. I love it when people come to me and say, "Oh, I'm starting off. What would you do?" And I I'm an open book. I'll just happily give advice.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. You've been an exceptional guest. If people want to get hold of you, Melanie, how do they do that, please?
Yeah, they can WhatsApp me on 07852940409, or they can look at my website if they just search Melanie Attwater EXP Luxury. They can find my website, they can see who I am, see what I do, and also check me out on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for being a great guest. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening. Please like, share, do whatever you need to do. And until the next time, have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye.
Bye.